Good morning. Thank you thank you, Jesse, for bringing me here, and thank you, LDPI, for organizing this event and for inviting me. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. It's a real pleasure to see so many people interested, engaged, passionate about these issues. I think over the past few years we have seen more and higher quality research coming out, and we know much more about what's happening than we did a few years ago. And this is great, and it's wonderful to see that this process is continuing. The research agenda is continuing to shape up. I've been asked to suggest 4 big picture questions, and I don't know whether the ones I have are really the biggest picture one, but I'll try and come up with go through 4 main points. So the first one is about understanding and framing the processes that are happening. How we're looking at a single big land grab, or are we witnessing multiple processes that are unfolding in different contexts and in different ways that are perhaps converging, but that involve different players and different arenas. I think a lot of the attention in international discussions has focused on the global players, on the global processes. Within that, there's a huge amount of diversity of motivations, of players, drivers, but also at the village level, a lot of people are feeling the squeeze, not so much because global corporates are taking the land, but because land concentration is increasing at the local level, within the village, within the country. You have politicians, you have government officials, you have military generals, former liberation fighters, business people, you name it. These people are really involved with the deals. Inventories that have been done in a number of countries consistently show that national elites are driving a lot of what's happening. And the players, the arenas that they engage with are different, and they interlock with the global processes. 2 weeks ago I was in Ghana. One of the biofuels projects I visited was owned by an Italian company, a 40,000 hectare plantation for jatropha. It had been set up by a Ghanaian national that for a while lived overseas, came back, linked up with Italian consultants. They found an investor, but the initiative didn't come from the Italian company. They initially came from the country, in fact from the village, from the city where the company is based. And so it's understanding these different processes that are going on and how they interlock that I think can give us, perhaps can help us increase our analytical power in analyzing what is really happening in the countries. The second point has to do with what the deals mean for host countries and communities. And I think there's an overwhelming body of evidence out there now that shows how bad news this is for people who are affected by the deals. People are losing their land and resources, the water, the trees, and the promises that are made with the investments often do not materialize. A lot of companies have gone bankrupt. Many deals are not only marginally implemented. The jobs haven't materialized, and I think that I believe that reinforces the case for those who argue for the role of defending the role of smallholder farmers in the global south, in places like Africa, where smallholder agriculture accounts for the backbone, really, of agricultural systems. Speak up. But I also want to be a bit provocative and ask a question, which is this mainly, is the fault line in this debate mainly about scale, smallholders, small-scale farming versus large-scale farming, or is it about control? And the reason why I'm asking that is there are different rural walls in any given place. There's a colleague, There's a colleague at IIED called Bill Voley that has been developing this concept. And when you go to the field, there is a smallholder farmer that is dynamic, is perhaps integrated into commercial, in global value chains, but there's then somebody else who doesn't have any land, doesn't have any resources. The emergence of proletarians, if you want, so people who only have their labor, doesn't start with the international deals. It's already going on in many parts of Africa as a result of population pressure and ever smaller plots. And the question there is, the poorest of the poor, the people who don't have land, the people who don't have the resources to run successful smallholder farms, what are their prospects, what are their aspirations, what will benefit them most, and how can they be brought into the equation. Again, a couple of weeks ago in Ghana, some of the people I spoke to were very keen to have jobs provided for them. A woman was saying, before I was working for free on my husband's plot, now I actually earn an income. My husband asks me for money that I earn from my job. And that really increases the complexity for us as researchers when we approach these issues. How do we increase local control so that people have a greater power on the direction of their own lives without coming into the discussion with their own with our own agenda, perhaps shaped many miles away from those people. The third question is, if it is about control, then what responses do we need to bring to put in place? And I think the issue of responses to what's happening is perhaps one issue where there has been a huge amount of change over the past year and a half or so compared to when we last met in Sussex. Back then, the emphasis was on looking at international responses, the debates about the voluntary guidelines, the RAI principles and all that. I think now there's a growing body of evidence that shows that people themselves are not passive observers of what's happening. They are very much active, they're very much driving response strategies, quite often in alliance with transnational, national groups, NGOs, diaspora associations, producer organizations and all that. How do we, as researchers, understand what responses are working, what are not working, how can those responses be supported, but also how can we better understand what are the fundamental drivers that are shaping what's happening. A lot of the deals are responding to speculation, but there are also very strong, powerful market and policy forces that today favor exclusionary deals over other types of agricultural investment. How do we understand those pressures? How can we identify the pressure points that can be used to change those forces? So really an agenda around responses and how best to support responses and make them effective. And then the fourth question is concerns us as researchers. What is the role of research in this space? I suspect that most of us are researchers in the sense of being observers, but we also feel very passionate about what we're seeing and we want to make a difference, we want to engage. And so how do we do that? Has the vast body of evidence that has emerged over the past 2 or 3 years on this issue translated into change in policy and practice? How has that happened? How do we keep track of that? And if it hasn't happened, how can we be more effective at influencing the world out there in our work? What balance can we strike between the demand that exists out there for concrete facts and figures and insights and practical solutions on the one hand, with the need to look at the deeper processes, the more theoretical questions that are raised by this whole set of issues? How can we take up Shalmali's call earlier this morning for us to engage more and better with people who are actually driving the response strategies, particularly on the field? How can we bridge what we're doing in research with policy, with practice, with action? Thank you.